John was an English teacher. He lived in a small, quiet town. The town was beautiful. There were green trees, colorful flowers, and clean streets. The air was fresh, and the people were kind. Everyone in the town knew each other. John's house was small but comfortable. It had one bedroom, a kitchen, and a living room. There was also a small garden outside. In the garden, John grew flowers and vegetables. He liked to water the plants every evening. He often said, "A small garden makes a big smile." Inside the house, the furniture was simple. John had a wooden table and a soft chair in the living room. On the table, there were books and papers. The walls had pictures of his family and students. John loved his home. It was not big, but it was full of happy memories. Every morning, John woke up at 6:30. The first thing he did was open the window. He liked to feel the cool morning air. Then, he made his bed and brushed his teeth. After that, he prepared breakfast. He usually ate bread with butter and drank tea. Sometimes, he added an egg or an apple. John always packed his bag before leaving for school. His bag was heavy because it had many books, papers, and small toys for his students. He walked to school every day. The school was about 15 minutes away. On the way, he greeted his neighbors. They smiled and said, "Good morning, John." When John arrived at school, the children were waiting for him. They stood near the gate and said, "Good morning, Mr. John." John waved at them and said, "Good morning, my wonderful students." He liked to call them wonderful because he believed every child was special. In the classroom, John wrote the day's date on the board. Then, he asked, "How is everyone today?" The children answered, "We are fine, thank you." John smiled and said, "Let's start our lesson." John's lessons were fun and simple. He used pictures, songs, and games to teach English. One of his favorite games was Find the Word. He wrote English words on small cards and hid them in the classroom. The children searched for the cards and read the words aloud. Sometimes, John taught the children a song. He played the guitar and sang. The children clapped their hands and joined him. One of their favorite songs was about animals. It went like this. Dog says woof, cat says meow. The cow says moo, oh what a sound. Sing with me, let's learn today. English is fun, hooray, hooray. The children laughed and sang loudly. John loved seeing their happy faces. He always said, "A happy student learns better." One day, a new student joined the class. Her name was Lily. She was very shy and didn't speak much. John noticed her sitting alone. After class, he talked to her. "Lily, do you like English?" he asked softly. Lily nodded but didn't say anything. John gave her a small notebook and said, "Write one English word every day. Show it to me tomorrow." The next day, Lily came to John with her notebook. She had written the word apple. John smiled and said, "Good job, Lily. Let's write another word today." Slowly, Lily became more confident. She started talking to other children and answering questions in class. John was proud of her progress. John grew up in a small village. His family was not rich, but they were happy. His parents worked hard to give him a good life. John loved learning as a child. He was curious about everything. When he was 5, his mother taught him how to read. She used an old book with colorful pictures. John held the book and said, "I want to read all the books in the world." At school, John's favorite subject was English. His teacher, Mr. Wilson, made the lessons exciting. Mr. Wilson often told stories about faraway places. "English is a key," he said. "It can open many doors." These words stayed in John's heart. He decided he wanted to teach English when he grew up. When John was a teenager, he studied hard. He did not have many toys, but he had books. He borrowed books from his school library and read them at night. His favorite book was about a boy who traveled the world and learned new languages. One day, John's father asked him, "What do you want to do in the future?" John replied, "I want to be an English teacher. I want to help children learn." His father smiled and said, "That's a good dream, John. Work hard, and you will make it true." After many years of study, John became a teacher. His first job was in a small town. He was nervous on his first day. "Will the children like me?" he thought. But when he walked into the classroom, the children smiled at him. One boy stood up and said, "Welcome, teacher." John felt warm in his heart. He knew he was in the right place. One afternoon, during a lesson, John asked the children, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" A girl named Sarah raised her hand. "I want to be a doctor," she said. "That's wonderful, Sarah. Why do you want to be a doctor?" John asked. "Because I want to help people," Sarah replied with a big smile. A boy named Tom shouted, "I want to be a pilot." "A pilot? That's amazing, Tom." John said. "Where do you want to fly?" "Everywhere," Tom said, waving his arms like airplane wings. The whole class laughed. John loved these moments. He believed every child had a dream, and he wanted to help them reach it. One day, a student named Emily stayed after class. She looked worried. "Mr. John, can I ask you something?" she said softly. "Of course, Emily. What's on your mind?" John replied. "I'm not good at English. I feel scared when I speak," Emily said, looking down. John smiled and said, "Emily, everyone starts small. When I was your age, I couldn't speak English well either." "Really?" Emily asked, her eyes wide. "Yes," John said. "I made mistakes, but I kept trying. Mistakes are part of learning. Let's practice together, one step at a time." From that day, Emily stayed after class to practice with John. She slowly became more confident. John often told his students stories from his childhood. One day, he said, "When I was young, I wanted to visit many countries. But I couldn't afford to travel. So, I read books instead. Books became my windows to the world." The children listened with wide eyes. "Teacher," Tom asked, "have you visited any countries now?" John laughed. "Not yet, Tom. But one day, I will. And when I do, I'll tell you all about it." The children clapped and cheered. They loved hearing about John's dreams and stories. One rainy afternoon, John was sitting in the classroom after school. He was grading papers when he noticed Lily, the shy girl, still sitting at her desk. "Lily, is everything okay?" he asked gently. Lily looked at him with teary eyes. "Mr. John, I don't understand the homework." It's too hard for me, she said. John walked over and sat beside her. Lily, it's okay to find things hard sometimes. That's how we learn, he said with a smile. He opened her notebook and explained the task step by step. See? You're already doing great, he said when she wrote her first correct answer. Lily smiled for the first time that day. Thank you, Mr. John. I'll try my best, she said. John always believed in encouraging his students. He remembered how his own teacher, Mr. Wilson, had helped him when he struggled. As a boy, John had trouble with writing essays. Mr. Wilson didn't scold him. Instead, he said, "John, your ideas are wonderful. Let's work on how to write them clearly." That kindness stayed with John forever. One summer, the school organized a sports day. John was chosen to lead the children in a relay race. "Mr. John, are you fast?" Tom asked with a cheeky grin. John laughed and said, "I used to be fast when I was your age. Let's see if I still am." The race began, and the children cheered loudly for their team. John ran as fast as he could, laughing all the way. Though their team didn't win, the children said, "Mr. John, you're the best." John replied, "Winning isn't everything. Having fun together is what matters." One evening, John sat in his small garden, thinking about his life. He remembered his first lesson as a teacher. The children had been noisy, and he felt nervous. But as the days passed, he learned how to connect with them. Teaching is not just about books, he thought. It's about understanding, patience, and love. John's students often brought him small gifts. One winter, Emily gave him a hand-knitted scarf. "My mom helped me make this for you," she said shyly. John wrapped the scarf around his neck and said, "This is the warmest scarf I've ever worn." "Thank you, Emily." Another time, Sarah brought him a flower from her garden. "Mr. John, this is for you." "It's my favorite flower," she said. John put the flower in a small vase on his desk and said, "Now the classroom looks even more beautiful." "Thank you, Sarah." Years passed, and John saw many students grow up and leave the school. Some of them wrote letters to him, telling him about their lives. One letter from Tom said, "Dear Mr. John, I am now studying to be a pilot. You were the first person who believed in my dream. Thank you for everything." John kept these letters in a wooden box. On quiet nights, he opened the box and read them. Each letter reminded him why he chose to be a teacher. One snowy day, a young man visited John's house. He was tall and wore a bright smile. "Mr. John, do you remember me?" he asked. John looked closely and said, "Tom. Is that you?" "Yes, it's me," Tom said. "I'm a pilot now. I just came back from my first international flight. I wanted to thank you in person." John felt his heart fill with pride. "You made your dream come true, Tom. I'm so proud of you," he said. As John grew older, his hair turned gray, but his love for teaching never faded. He continued to teach with the same energy and kindness. He often told his students, "Dream big and work hard. You can do anything you set your mind to." One spring morning, John stood by the classroom window. The sun was shining, and birds were singing. He felt grateful for his job and his students. Teaching was not always easy, but it was always rewarding. He thought about how he started this journey. When John was a young man, he went to a university in a big city. It was the first time he left his small village. The city was noisy and crowded. At first, John felt lonely. But he made friends with his classmates, and they often studied together. His favorite class was teaching methods. The professor, Dr. Harris, was a kind and funny man. Teaching is like planting a garden, Dr. Harris often said. Every student is a seed. With care and patience, they will grow into strong and beautiful flowers. John remembered those words when he started teaching. He treated each student with care. One day, a boy named Ben joined his class. Ben was new to the town, and he didn't know anyone. During lunch, he sat alone. John noticed this and said, "Ben, why don't you join us?" Ben smiled shyly and said, "Thank you, Mr. John." From that day, John made sure Ben felt welcome. He encouraged the other children to play with him. Soon, Ben had many friends, and he became one of the happiest students in the class. Another time, John helped a student named Clara. Clara was very good at drawing, but she was not confident in speaking English. John asked her, "Clara, can you draw a picture of your favorite animal?" Clara nodded and drew a beautiful picture of a horse. John said, "This is amazing. Now, can you tell me about your horse in English?" At first, Clara hesitated. But John helped her with the words. "The horse is big," she said. "It runs fast." "Perfect, Clara," John said. "You're doing great." Clara smiled and felt proud. John also liked to teach through storytelling. Every Friday, he told his students a story in English. One story was about a brave little bird who learned to fly. The children loved it. After the story, John asked, "What can we learn from the little bird?" Sarah raised her hand and said, "We should not be afraid to try." "That's right, Sarah," John said. "Trying is the first step to success." One winter evening, John stayed late at school to prepare for a lesson. As he walked home, snow began to fall. The streets were quiet, and the snow made everything look magical. John thought about his life and felt happy. "I may not have much money, but I have something better, students who inspire me every day," he said to himself. Years later, when John retired, the school held a big party for him. Many of his old students came to thank him. Emily, who was once shy, gave a speech. "Mr. John, you didn't just teach us English. You taught us to believe in ourselves." "Thank you for everything," she said. John's eyes filled with tears. "Teaching you all was the greatest honor of my life," he said. Even after retirement, John continued to teach in small ways. He gave free lessons to children in his neighborhood. He also wrote a book about his teaching experiences. The book was called The Teacher's Garden, and it became popular in his town. John's life was simple, but it was full of meaning. He often said, "A teacher's success is not in money or fame. It's in the hearts of the students they help."